بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. By the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we start this new section here, and this section is all about the intellectual dimension of Islam. Now, when I say of Islam, it doesn't mean that Islam has an intellectual dimension other than the other human beings, but it means that it is where the Islamic scholars clarified the rules of how do we actually um, look at intellect and look at how the mind works. What are the pillars from our perspective and from what the Muslim scholars have worked with? But intellect and the mind, the brain, is shared among all the humans. So when we're talking about this subject here, we're actually kind of setting the common ground between all the humans. Now, it is the way we are looking at this subject, that is what it is Islamic about it. Because um, as Muslims, we think that there has to be a common ground between everybody, no matter what your background is, no matter what your culture is, no matter what your belief is, no matter what your perspective is, there has to be something within the human beings that they actually share, other than being human, other than, humanity itself, other than just being who we are. And this shared common ground is something that we can, converse about, something we can have a discussion, something that we can agree upon. That's the word that I'm looking for. We're all humans. We all live on the same planet, but what is the standard? What is the thing that we all have, we cannot deny, that we all have, we cannot just overlook because it is so prominent, it is so obvious and so essential and basic and fundamental that everybody actually submits to. And that's the intellect, that's the mind, that's logic. And some people would find that the subject of logic is a dry subject. It is actually not. It might feel that it is dry because how some people treat it, but the actual logical dimension is one of the most lean and beautiful dimensions because of it, we can actually understand all the previous and the next dimensions. And so, if we want to set the basis for all the strong things that we are going to be handling next, all the other next dimensions. So we have this one, which is the first lesson of the intellectual dimension of Islam. After it, we will have the spiritual dimension of Islam. So, and then we have the moral dimension of Islam, then we have the practical dimension of Islam, then we would have the end of time, death, and the hereafter section. And finally, last but not least, the Islamic culture and, queries or querying. Now, all of those that I mentioned start from the spiritual dimension of Islam, moral, practical, end of time, death, and hereafter or afterlife, and the Islamic culture. All this actually will depend on the intellectual dimension of Islam. Why didn't I do it before the section before, which is building the Islamic mindset, or the one before it, which is the basic fundamentals of Islam? Because the basic fundamentals of Islam and the building the Islamic mindset, those are things that everybody should take and understand before start getting deep and deep into, into learning. But if we want to advance more, if we want to actually understand our religion more, if we want to have a deep um, look into Islam, if we want to set, as I said, a common, ground between us and all the other religions and other humans, how can we have like a common shared language? We need to get into the intellectual dimension of Islam. We need to understand it because our meetings are around like 30 minutes. Um, so I'm gonna try my best to give you the most of it, but I also want to make it very long. Um, yeah. So to start with the intellectual dimension of Islam, we need to understand that um, we have several. Hold on here. Okay, we have several things to talk about. So this is going to be kind of foundational, level by level. So each lesson we will increase the difficulty, not a difficulty, but it's we are building. So each lesson will be, you know, us like taking more and adding more. So whoever wants to actually understand the entire thing properly, they need to go back to this lesson, start from here. So starting from here, then the next lesson, then the next lesson, then the next lesson, so on. Because probably in the future somebody will jump in to the one of the lessons and they would understand nothing or to be very difficult for them because we have been building for so long, like starting from this lesson here. Now, first of all, I want to say something that um, the goal here behind the intellectual dimension of Islam is that we build a foundation for straight thinking because we have thinking, we can think, but we can think in a deviated way or like a corrupted way, or we can think in a straight manner, in a correct thought, straight thinking. So the goal here is that after we complete this dimension, this section, this entire chapter, the intellectual dimension of Islam, our thoughts, our mind will have the foundation that when we apply, when we practice upon, when we incorporate in our life, our thinking will be straight. We will think correctly. Why? Because we have the mind. As I said, everybody has the mind. Now, let's just consider it for a while that the mind is a tool. Having the tool doesn't mean that you know how to or, understand how to use that tool. So we have the tool, but we need bases, we need foundations, we need conditions, we need the right way to use this tool. Without the foundations of straight thinking, we will only have thinking, but we do not have straight thinking. And for us to think properly, our thinking need to be straight. Our thinking need to be correct. And this is very important because everything relies on the mind. Literally everything regarding information, science, understanding, comprehending, logic relies on the mind. So if our mind and our thinking is not straight, everything will be warped, everything will be distorted, everything will be confusing, and we will have big problems. Big problems, why? Because um, we are not using the tool properly. So we will start setting the principles or the foundations so that our thinking is straight. And when we achieve this level of straight thinking, we will see that a lot of things are going to be straight, including our thinking, for sure, but also our emotions, also how we look at the world, also our actions and how we act. So the entirety of the human being becomes better as a human being when the thinking is straight. And then we will discover that as a human, um, we share this mind, we share this tool, and we, all of us, can use it correctly. The exception is that some of us didn't learn what we are going to be learning today, or learned it partially, or some of them knows it, but they just ignore it. They do not incorporate it. They do not implement it. Okay, and this is bad because that's what hypocrisy means. It is, you know, something that it is the correct thing. Uh, you know that this is the actual right thing to do. And then what happens is that you just ignore it. And this is really bad because it's like you have the door. You know that at night you need to close the door, you leave it open. So what happens there? Animals get in, thieves get in, people who are unwanted get in, you know, cold breeze get in, and we would say why our life is distorted, why our life is incorrect, why our life is not well. Well, because we left the door open, even though we have the door and we can close it. Okay. Now, in Arabic, um, the word mind um, means it's called aql. It's three words: ayn, a, qaf, qa, and lam, la, a, qa, la, aql. Um, the thing about the Arabic language is that it is a descriptive language. It is not just a noun that it is used. It actually is descriptive. It describes what's going on. And so, what the word عقلة means in Arabic, the word itself, it means to like imprison or put in custody or hold on to something um like how you have the horse and you're pulling the horse how you tight something, constrain it. So the word aqala means habasa, means to constrain something, to tie something, to put something in custody, to put something in lockup, to take hold of something. And why the Arabs named the aql, the mind, as aql, the meanings I told you about? Because the mind is the tool, is the thing that constrains you, that, hinders you from doing the wrong thing. So we can do anything and everything. What is the thing that is actually going to hinder us? What is the hinderer? It is the mind. It is the thing that will actually, you know, pull us back before we go and, you know, put ourselves in danger, put ourselves in a situation that will doom us, annihilate us, harm us. So the mind, when it's used correctly, it will guide you to the right thing and hinder you from the wrong thing. That's the duty of the mind. It is to hinder you from the bad thing, from the negative thing. But when we can't use it, the mind will work in an instinctive way, like very, in a primitive way, then it will, hinder you from putting your hand in fire, or for example, jumping from a high place, eating or drinking something that is toxic and you is toxic and it's harmful, you know, using the knife in a wrong way. That's what normally happens when the mind is working, but not advanced, not in, a more trained way. It's going to only work in a primitive way, and it will hinder you from the primitive wrong things. When you train the mind, when you have the foundations built and you practice it, it will actually hinders you from even the um, intellectual negative things, from the harmful intellectual thoughts. Now, some people would ask maybe, okay, then why some people would commit suicide? Why some people, um, for example, will do bad things? Well, because their mind has a problem, rather chemically or thinking way, in a thoughtful way. So their thoughts are not straight, their thoughts are not in the right place. That's why, or the thought is thinking that, okay, let me get rid of this life because this life is a burden more than death, which they don't know that because they haven't experienced death. And so they would think that they are judging or concluding what they are doing of harming themselves or committing suicide is better than what is coming. That's because their mind is not hindering them, it's not working properly. And the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam has a very authentic hadith, as far as narration, says that whoever commits suicide, they will be committing suicide in hell forever in the same way they did here. So if they drink poison, it's the same thing, committing the same exact thing, drinking the same exact thing forever in hell. Whoever, you know, gets, like stabs himself to death or stabbed himself and died will be doing that forever in hell. Um, Whoever throws themselves from, an elevated area and just falls down and die, they would be throwing themselves forever, and so on and so forth. So what's coming? afterwards. It depends on what you're doing with your life here. And so they didn't know that. Therefore, their judgment was incorrect because life is not ours. Life is a gift from God. So we cannot just decide who dies when. And so why they didn't know that? Because, well, they didn't become a Muslim. They didn't, they didn't like go to the revelation to see what God told them, what God revelated to them. Just trying to give example as why would people do such bad things? It is because the mind, it is not working properly. They have the mind, it is there, it is not working. So for us to use the mind correctly, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to use it correctly and benefit from it, inshallah, I mean, we need to understand it. We need to start implement it. We need to start knowing its foundation. It's like you have a car, okay? You have a car, but you're driving all around the place. You're making accidents. You're violating the laws. You're doing wrong things. And having a car, you need to understand, you need to learn how to use it. The same thing for the mind. So it's very important, very, very important. Now, what is the mind? The mind is a gift from God. We'll talk about that later more, but I just want to say that the mind is actually an innate, it's a natural thing in humans. Normally, like with everybody, it works correctly. There are some people who actually lose their mind, become insane, lose their sanity, and those who we call crazy. Why do we call them crazy? Because they went away from the right, the innate, the natural thinking matter of the mind, the natural operational way of the mind. So the mind is a natural instinct that Allah created in us, which we can judge things properly according to everything's characteristics. And so it's an instinct, okay? Um, it's an innate natural instinct Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in us. And we will go back to this inshallah later, but the mind is the last judger. It's the last judge. It's the last um, authority regarding information and judging if something is wrong or right. Even Revelation, even the Quran, comes to talk to the mind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revelated the Quran to be in Arabic because the Arabic language is a language that is built kind of different, and it can contain and maintain the intent of God behind the revelation more than any other language. Why Arabic language? So that we can think. That's the goal. Because we need to think, we need to figure things out. How do we do that? It's with our mind. So if the mind was incorrect, operating incorrectly, even though we have the revelation of God, we would not be able to understand it. The revelation of God subhanahu wa ta'ala was shown, was appeared to us in Arabic because the Arabic language is an intellectual language in its nature. So it's like God is gifting us the religion of Islam in the best way possible for us as humans so that we can, when we want to understand the revelation, we can understand this um, very kind of professional language so that we can get the best of that religion, so that we would not be wandering. Okay? Why is that? Because language is the most important thing. I'm not saying that Arabic is the only best language. What I'm saying is that even people who speak English, they need to understand English well so they would have a straight thinking. Every person in their language, in their native language, they need to have a good understanding of that language so that the meaning behind each word would be clear, so that the mind, which we all share and works the same exact way, despite the language, can process things correctly. So if we start, if we want to start with something which is next lesson, inshallah, so this is an introduction, we will start with the language. We will start with why language, how language, all the things related to it, and you will inshallah see it amazing. It is amazing. It is very beautiful. And this journey we're going through together, inshallah, is going to be a fun, at the same time very, very educational. To be honest with you, I do not think that there is any framework in English um, than the one I'm going to give. So probably this will be those series starting from this lesson moving on. I think this will be very, very unique, and I don't think anybody um, in English that have or had listened to this these kind of concepts in this way before, as far as I know. And so I'm very excited to this to continue with this. And another thing is that we have multiple areas we will be touching on now. Um, Before starting there, as I said, next lesson, inshallah, will start in the first things first. After completing this, after completing and understanding this dimension, the intellectual dimension of Islam, we would be able, inshallah, to get into Islamic theology, like Ilm al-Kalam, easily. We will be able to get into philosophy easily. We would be able to get into the principles of Islamic jurisprudence if we want to. Um, it's just going to be different afterwards because the mind is organized. The mind has the bases, the foundations, the principles that it operates on. Another thing is that the concepts will start getting to be correct. Our judgment on lives will be more clear. Even from the emotional side, our emotions will start clearer to become clearer and more, stable, because people may think that the mind has nothing to do with emotions. No, it has everything to do with emotions. Um, so, our perception is going to be different. Okay. Our awareness and consciousness is going to be different after this. And some people may think, well, that's a big talk. Well, it's not a big talk. It happened, and people tried it, and it changed how people think, how people see life, how they start operate. So we will talk about all that inshallah in the next lesson. Do you have any questions? Oh, by the way, just before any questions, after this, um, atheism will be annihilated, extremism will be annihilated. Why? Because, as I said, we're not like bringing something outside of the human being. The human intellect denies and doesn't accept atheism and extremism as how the mental framework of the human being works, not the Islamic. Because, as I said, what we are going to take, what we are going to talk about, has nothing to do with Islam. It has everything to do with humans. So then, why did I call it the intellectual dimension of Islam? Because I'm just talking about how the Muslims arrange this framework. As I said, this is an innate, this is a natural thing, this is in us. We did not invent thinking, we did not invent the mind or logic. Logic is there. One is half of two is there. We just named it. We just paid attention to it. And that's exactly what I mean here. So nothing has to do with what we are going to be doing has to do with Islam. Everybody can take this section that I'm going to talk about here. Every human being who wants to understand how the mind operates. And they can judge it. They can take it until the end and they can judge what I'm going to be saying here. They can judge every word and they will see in the end that they cannot deny it because one is the half of two. It's not something that anybody invented or anybody wants um to to oppress on people. It is just what it is. It is objectivity. It is not a subjective thing. It is the truth. It's the reality. And that's the intellectual dimension of Islam. And this is the basis. Imagine this. This is the big thing. After this, this is actually the basis of the Islamic creed. The Islamic theology is based on the innate natural way of thinking of humans because God is the one who created humans. Very simple. Do you have any questions, guys? Okay. We'll meet inshallah in the next lesson. We'll see you there inshallah. Do not miss it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.